What's up, everyone? This is second attempt at this script. I tried to film it this morning, but one thing after another just kind of seemed to go wrong. So this is actually my second time trying to get this script out. But I'll treat it like a rehearsal run because now maybe I'll be able to get through this a little more. This is a start to a new series I'm gonna have called Scanning Faces. It won't be a really huge big deal series, but it's something I'm gonna revisit from time to time as different characters pop into my head of relevance to the story, relevance to the Final Saga specifically, and certainly relevance to the arcs that we have at hand. So, like today, I'll be mostly talking about stuff in the scope of Egghead arc, a little stuff going beyond, but let's rip roar right into it. Um, let's start off with an old Vice Admiral Smoker. Um, haven't seen him since Dressrosa, when he was recovering from his wounds that he received from Doflamingo, but we can assume he's somewhere close to G14 because Tishigi is there at G14. If he's not there, he's perhaps at Marineford, New Marineford, I guess, New Navy HQ, Mary Joie, who knows where he could be exactly. I personally don't suspect he's very far from Egghead, though. I think he will be showing up. But just real quick, let's look at last time we saw him. Smoker is recovering from his wounds he got from Dofi. He's reading the newspaper about Admiral Fujitora, who was successful essentially in rounding up the Doflamingo gang, sending them to prison, Impel Down. I believe they all went to Impel Down. Definitely Doflamingo, obviously. Um, and it strikes me as a parallel. Obviously the entire Dressrosa arc is a parallel to Alabasta, but I think Smoker is seeing some parallels between Doflamingo and Crocodile. He's seeing, perhaps you could say, perpendiculars, though. Something that is not going the same way, and that the warlords do get disbanded after Dressrosa. Fujitora is successful in prosecuting Doflamingo and the warlord system in general. Now, I see a hint of insecurity in Smoker because of that. What that means for him in Isho, or what that means for him in Luffy, or so many different characters. Maybe even Crocodile. Him and Crocodile have a who knows what could happen there. But I sense insecurity, and I sense a chance for us to explore a really unique facet of the Navy through Smoker and Fujitora. But I'll talk about that a little more as we get to Fujitora. For now, let's move on to the other G14 Marines. We haven't seen them in a little bit, I believe, since 1061. It's starting to feel like, when are you all gonna come back into the story a little bit? Like, it's supposed to be G14 really close to Egghead, so I kind of figured they'd be here by now, but it can't be much longer if, CP0 is here and Kizaru is on his way. Vice Admiral Dahl still strikes me the exact same, sort of adjacent, but kind of a buffer figure for, the sword members. Prince Groose, Commander Hibari. Tashigi is there. She's someone I'm pretty curious about. I'm very curious what she's going to do with Sword, if she's going to join, if she's not going to join. She's definitely a friend to Sword, that much is obvious. But what I'm more interested about is her and Zoro. I think in this final saga we're going to see a full-fledged duel between them that is going to round out the duel they, you could say Zoro definitely finished it in Logtown, but I see a potential for Oda to round it out, have them have one last duel, show what Tashigi has learned in the new world, show that she's able to face Zoro quite well, but in the end, Zoro is just becoming the master swordsman. Not a master swordsman, the master swordsman. Now, it could also go that he fights S-Hawk, the Seraphim Mihawk. I think that could be a very interesting route to take too. Personally, I want him to duel both of them. Maybe Mihawk first, and he has a duel where he is a little disappointed. He wanted to fight the real Mihawk, not some kid. And it's a little, like this creation is kind of taking the majesty of what he wanted to accomplish away, but then he'll realize as he's fighting Seraphim Mihawk, oh, there's a lot about experience that goes into your strength. Mihawk had leagues of experience, you know. That's why he's that strong. Perhaps there could be like a little flashback to his fight with Mihawk on the Baradier, where, you know, he thinks back then and he's like, Mihawk is stronger. He knows he's fought them both, and he can remember, even though he has come so far, Mihawk is still stronger than Seraphim Mihawk. And then maybe move on to Tashigi. Maybe he has to overcome a learning curve similar to in Alabasta, where he overcame the ability to cut steel, at least for a bit. I think he had to train harder to actually get it, but he kind of tapped into it there. Could be something here with experience instead, and he starts to really value the experience he's gaining and look for hungrier, harder foes to gain experience from. And then fight Tashigi and deal with the backstory and trauma of Quina dying. Could be a very interesting arc for him. Last but not least, for G14, we've got Helmeppo. He's an interesting one. I'm mostly in the same camp with him in that I think we're going to see a full circle of his character. He's going to beg Luffy to help Kobe when he shows up on Egghead. And what Luffy does with that, because it seems like we'll go to Elbaf next. We'll just have to wait and see. Maybe it will be Blackbeard first, then Elbaf. I don't know. That could be very, very interesting, for sure. But I think we're going to see Helmeppo come full circle as a character, and he'll truly become someone other than Captain Morgan's bratty son. Even though he's already come so much farther than that, I still just get that vibe from him every now and again. He can still come off as a little whiny, a little needy, and that could be a good push for him to swallow his pride and punch up once more in his own ceiling, find a new ceiling for himself. Okay, so next up, let's talk about Admiral Fujitora. Fujitora is perhaps the most significant Navy Admiral in the post-time skip. He had that huge role in Dressrosa, of course. He's immensely powerful, the only Admiral to have a Paramecia Devil Fruit among the known wielders of the Admiral rank. I know there was Admiral Zephyr, but I'm counting the strictly canon Admirals, is it 5 or 6? It's 5. Isho has this insane skill combined with innate ability, suggested by his ease of combat despite being blind. I personally find him to be the scariest Admiral for that reason, but I know the general consensus is that he is a good guy. I don't personally subscribe to that fully. I think in his heart is in the right place. But first of all, there's just something about Senior Pink's swim fruit in S Shark that just does not sit right with me whatsoever. I'm very worried for Senior Pink, and I guess the rest of the Doflamingo crew. Like it is kind of horrifying to think if they were exploited for their lineage factors and just executed for that instead of for even just justice. Not that I want them executed. I don't condone execution, but I know there's not much to go off there. It's maybe paranoia that Senior Pink is dead, but I'm worried Fujitora had them killed in part due to that cover panel of Frankie and Senior Pink enjoying their drink together. Why would they not get to do that in the canon? You know, I kind of suspect the last cover story will be the Straw Hats post the story. So that way, you know, he doesn't have to drag the story out into a long epilogue that goes into like, 60 years later, where is everyone now? He's just going to do it in a flash forward cover panel. And I would imagine that something like that might be saved for that series of cover panels. Now, he may never do that. That may just be my own imagination. But at the same time, for it to be a reader request, that just feels like a big one. That just feels like a big one. That feels like something Frankie would do and that we could assume he would do. Perhaps that is the end of Pink, and if Fujitora is responsible, that would be very interesting. I don't know how I would. I mean, I already feel like his stance on the warlord system versus the seraphim system is clouded. Yes, the warlord system needed to be disbanded. It was a corrupt institution that allowed people like Doflamingo and Crocodile and Moria to get away with terrible, heinous crimes. And in the end, is it for the best that they were disbanded? Yes. Are the seraphims the best replacement? I know that they are, you know, proving to be an asset right now. I do think they're going to make the flip and be enemies of the Straw Hats, but by then, the end of the Final Saga, they'll have flipped again and be back on their side. Yet at the same time, I don't think that's all they're doing. I don't think they're existing to be Oda's Order 66. I think Oda's saying something about them, having them be the child forms of the warlords growing up. At least so far, we know at least 4 are confirmed. We got Jinbei, Kuma, why am I wanting to say Bonnie? Bella Hancock, and Mihawk. I assume the others are around. I think it's interesting that they've hidden the 3 warlords that Luffy fought in the pre-time, well, and the post-time skip. The 3 warlords he fought, Moria, Crocodile, and Doflamingo. But what about Law? What about Bulky? Very curious about that, if they got their lineage factors. What about Blackbeard? I feel like that one won't work. I think we're all pretty well in agreement that that won't work, but we'll see. I digress a bit, though. Fujitora praises the Seraphims at the end of the day. He thinks these are the world-changing thing that they are. But this is a massive, massive action that even Vegapunk is partial to, is not innocent of. Cloning these people, messing with DNA in such a way to create these strange, mute creatures bidding for only war. You know, they only listen to other people. Combined with the sea beast that Lilith was trying to command, finding she couldn't overcome their primal powers, I think there's a lot to these seraphims that are going to end up being dangerous for potentially everyone. At the end of the day, so many great actions in One Piece end up in unintended consequences. Maybe not unintended, but things always escalate a little more than people expect. Luffy punched Charlos in the face, and within the hour, he and the Straw Hats were split up across the world, and they would not see each other for 2 years. Because of that. Because he did that. Hody Jones staged an assassination attempt on the life of Otohime and succeeded. And in doing so, he nearly embroiled Fishman Island in ruin. Decades after. Don Krieg, let's go back to Baratier for a second. Don Krieg decides to tussle with the wrong floating restaurant when the wrong rookie pirate just happened to be on there fulfilling a debt. And now his pirate career is tanked. He was a big shot. He was one of the biggest powers in the East Blue. He sailed the Grand Line, and yes, it was Mihawk. You know, Mihawk's a huge deal. Of course, he could decimate their fleet. But it took Mihawk to do that. And now his pirate career is over. We have not heard of him. He has not come back. Even Kuro, Captain Kuro, came back for a little bit when Luffy's first bounty was released. Don Krieg didn't. He is done. What sort of big action could be connected to Fujitora? When he blinded himself because he saw too many evil atrocities in the world. And to me, while I can sympathize with the sentiment, I have always thought since Dressrosa, but what is that making you blind to? Sure, he's great at combat. He can handle himself in a fight despite being blind fine. But I think him being blind, perhaps it will be in a purposeful way. He blinded himself to be able to have that excuse, to be able to overlook other evils. The evils of creating and cloning and messing with natural life like that to make seraphims out of people that are already alive. You know, there could be arguments about that these seraphims are deserving of life, that they're worthy, whatever, what have you. But the fact of the matter is, they're all people that exist, despite their Lunarian DNA, their devil fruits, their different upbringings. They are real people who did not consent to this. They did, you know, Jinbei, it makes that obvious. He did not consent to having his DNA used for that. So how can our good guy Admiral be okay with that? It seems strange that a random man from the draft with an immensely powerful devil fruit ability and an unrealized dream of another Navy officer that we know has a true sense of justice. He's been around, Smoker. He's been around since the beginning. Where else could Fujitora go? I think it's a little too simple to suggest he could become the next fleet admiral and lead us into a time of true justice. I don't think Isho's story is over. I think the Final Saga is going to give a lot of birth to the Admirals in general. I think we'll get Aramaki's story. I'm going to get into Kizaru right after this as well, but I think we're going to get into his story. And I think we're going to explore Fujitora's past, his machinations, his motivations, and ultimately see him choose the side of the world government. He will choose order before piracy, even if the pirates have the moral high ground, the just high ground even. Set morals aside, the just high ground. We're gonna have to see how that plays out. But in that same breath, as I said, look who's up next. Admiral Kizaru. Now, he's another character I see going through a twist. And don't worry, I'm not saying he's going to be a good guy. I think he's going to be a bigger bad guy than we think, personally. But I do think there's going to be a twist with him. So, as we've seen, and as many people believe, there are huge parallels between the pre and post time skip. Fishman Island has ties to the East Blue as well as Skypiea, in my opinion. Others are a little more one-to-one, Dressrosa and Alabasta. Wano, who is it? I believe it's Parvision. And no, it's Randy Troy. And I kind of agree with him. Wano is kind of the one-to-one of Thriller Bark. If Thriller Bark was kind of like a Enies Lobby, Alabasta, big epic arc, which it was a big deal arc, but it also came after Enies Lobby. It was a little more subdued, I would say. Point being, we're now on Egghead, which is proving to have parallels to Sabaody, an arc of tragedy. Now, the obvious thing is that Kizaru is already on his way here. Kizaru is the admiral we dealt with on Sabaody. We met him all the way back then for the first time. And we also met Sentomaru for the first time back then. Sentomaru has his own section that I'll really talk to. But what's relevant here about Kizaru is that on Sabaody, called Kizaru Uncle. And for a long time, I took that to be literal. I took that to be, this is Sentomaru's uncle, Kizaru, an admiral. They are blood related. That's his nephew, Sentomaru. And then I read on Reddit a long time ago, I could never find it even if I tried. Someone said, they're not really related, you guys. That is a term from the Yakuza that Oda is utilizing. And I looked it up and it was true. Uncle is kind of a term between older and younger members of the same ranks. So, with that in mind, I thought, I found that around the time of Wano, when Sword was fully formed, and I thought, could he be in Sword? Could Sentomaru be in Sword? But it didn't really stick, you know, it felt like it had the same sort of the same sort of vibe as, you know, like a Kainu being in Sword, just because he has that sword tattoo, which I actually delve into that in a little bit. That's not totally ruled out, but I would be kind of disappointed ultimately if the Kainu ended up being in Sword, I think. But Sentomaru calls him uncle. So what does that mean? Well, I think that got solved in 1069. He calls Vegapunk Grandpa Vegapunk. Vegapunk took care of Sentomaru. He raised him, brought him out of poverty and starvation, and he calls Kizaru uncle. And this is total inference. There's nothing to really suggest this yet. But I think Kizaru rescued Sentomaru and then brought him to Vegapunk for him to take care of and have a guardian. He recognized a strong child. Vegapunk might have been new to the world government and he wanted to have a protector with him. Maybe that was Sentomaru. And that's why Sentomaru has this kinship to them both, to call them uncle and grandpa. I'll be curious what that'll mean if that's the case for when Kizaru arrives. Could Kizaru wipe out CP0? Maybe. Or will he just aid them and kill the Straw Hats? Will he do his own thing? Something that still hasn't really been totally explained is, why do the pacifistas have his laser technology? I believe it was pretty explicitly stated. Vegapunk got that from Kizaru. Why is Kizaru so closely tied with Vegapunk? They've never had any scenes together. I can't remember Borsellino ever really talking about Vegapunk, but they've always been tied in my mind because of that reason. All of Egghead, we have had these teases as well of Kizaru's Devil Fruit with the hologram seeming to have his ability, the gloves that are able to harness light as a physical object, kind of hinting that, this is something that's going to be useful in a fight against Kizaru. But here's where things get a bit interesting. Let's assume Kizaru's return to Egghead is a close parallel to Sabaody. It's interesting to wonder to what capacity. Is he just going to be the guy taking people out left and right, kind of mopping up the situation? I don't think so. There's no celestial dragons involved. There's not that sort of hierarchy. There is a huge deal in Vegapunk's life being at risk at hand. Who knows what that'll mean to the Navy versus the world government. But then again, Kizaru is the most lackadaisical Marine that we've met. In that way, it makes him the most interesting. It seems to me that he is lackadaisical not by nature, but because he is that confident. There has to be some sort of initiative present for someone to get that far into the Navy. What has he really done? We don't really know. He wasn't at O'Hara. He took down Arlong at one point and brought him in for interrogation, but besides him dealing with Arlong in like a flashback, we don't really know much. He joined the Marines at 26 at the same time that Sakazuki joined, but Sakazuki was 23. He's a little older, okay. What else do we know? We know less about Kizaru, who's been around longer than Fujitora. Personally, and this isn't really true, I'm sure if you compiled the full list of what we know about each, it's not true. But to me, I feel like I know less about Kizaru than I know about Green Bull. Dead ass. I feel like I know more about Green Bull now. He could still have an interesting backstory, but I feel like I get Green Bull for the most part. I never once felt like I have gotten Kizaru. It makes me wonder if he has higher aspirations than just Admiral. Could it be Fleet Admiral, Commander-in-Chief? Does he want to get up into the echelons of the world government? What has caused his rise, his claim to fame? And what is he doing now? Is he just sitting back? I'm not sure. Could he be letting Akainu have the heat after, maybe he saw that Sengoku, whoever took Sengoku's spot would have a ton of heat. Maybe he didn't want that. Who'll come in after that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it could be. It almost feels like he has the potential to be a sleeper agent like Denjiro, but for himself. He is claiming for himself, and that is why he got Vegapunk a random, unaffiliated Sentomaru. Because Sentomaru wasn't with the Marines yet before before the time skip. What was that about? Now he's suddenly in the Marines. What is that all about? I think there's a mystery tying Kizaru to Vegapunk and Sentomaru, and unfortunately, since there's a big break until the next chapter, it's just speculation. I do think it's there. I do think it's going to be explored. He wouldn't be coming here if there weren't some sort of connection, because he was coming here before reports of CP0 even reached a Kainu in the Navy. Why? Why is he already heading there? Kizaru's already heading there as planned. Very curious. Very curious. On a Kainu's orders? On his own? On Kong's? On whose? And for what? That will be the curious part. Hey everybody, so I was editing the Scanning Faces video and I had a lot more to talk about in this script, but I realized even in just the first moments of me editing, this was probably going to be better if I split it up instead of creating 1 hour-long video. So this is the end of the first part. It'll be kind of jagged how it'll intercut between the second part, since I did record the whole script together. But thank you guys so much for your understanding. I'll definitely plan that out a little bit better for next time. Second part, keep an eye out. It'll definitely be up before 1070. And until then, take care, guys. Appreciate you.